lecture series. And without further ado, Rabbi Birchas, take it away. Thank you.
We're studying the HaMItzva, whose focus is on brachos on Leil HaSeder. And he asks the following questions. Lama ein mevarchim al kriyasa. Why don't we make a bracha on reading the Hagadah? K'moshe mevarchim al kriyas Megillah. Just like when we read the Megillah, we make a Birchas HaMItzva, asher kitshonu mitzvosav v'tzivanu. On the Kriya of the Megillah, we should make a bracha likewise on the Kriya of the Hagadah. And not only that, one could argue that there's even a Kal V'chomer here in this kasha, because Kriyas HaMegillah is only a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, and yet we give it a bracha. V'lo mitzvah sasehi, in the case of Hagadah, we're talking about a mitzvah Minat Torah. Shenemar v'Hagadah lebincha bayom hahu. So the big question here is, why don't we find a bracha on the mitzvah of Hagadah? Interesting that he calls it Kriyas Hagadah. And we wondered in general whether the mitzvah of Hagadah is belev, it's more of an emotional and a thought process, or it's the Kriya itself. And it seems from the language of the HaMItzva that it's a mitzvah of Kriya, to read the Hagadah. We saw that a Summa, whether or not he could read the Hagadah for the Bnei Bayis and be motzi them, would depend upon whether a Summa is chayiv in the mitzvah of Hagadah bincha or potter, because only a Gavra Bar Chiyuva can be motzi others. But we see that all the focus here is on the Kriya. There's a mitzvah of Kriya, and that should warrant a bracha. B'tirates, ki b'mesha omer b'tchila b'kiddush zeicher l'yitzias Mitzrayim yotza. He says that already at the beginning of the Hagadah, even before we put our front foot forward, so to speak, we've already fulfilled the mitzvah of Hagadah lebincha. And that's in Kiddush. It doesn't bother the Avudraham that it's integrated into the fabric and the matbea of Kiddush that applies the whole year round, every Shabbos and every Yom Tov. That doesn't bother us. As long as you recite those three holy words, Zeicher l'Yitzias Mitzrayim, you've already fulfilled your mitzvah. And a bracha has to come before the mitzvah. Well, you've already fulfilled the mitzvah, so it's too late. It's too late for a bracha. Now, my question to you tonight is the following. Is it really too late? If you tell me that Zeicher l'Yitzias Mitzrayim is it, that's the beginning and the end of the mitzvah of Hagadah, once you've recited Kiddush, you're Yotze already, then I agree with the Avudraham. But supposing I would tell you that although Zeicher l'Yitzias Mitzrayim is the, shall we say, the fabric or the essence of the mitzvah, but there's much more to go on. Which means that if you didn't make a bracha at the beginning of a mitzvah, is the door shut? Does it mean you can no longer make a bracha? What about a mitzvah where you begin, but then you continue? And you go beyond the bare minimum. The Avudraham seems to be assuming that, if I could check it off and say, oh yeah, I was Makayim the mitzvah of Hagadah because I recited in Kiddush Zeicher l'Yitzias Mitzrayim. What's going to be for the rest of the night? I'm not twiddling my thumbs. Do you remember what Chazal say about adding to the Sipri Yitzis Mitzrayim? Kol marbel l'sapri Yitzis Mitzrayim. So there's no question that the Kiyum mitzvah of Hagadah Lebincha, even if I would grant the premise of the Avraham that I could fulfill it with those three words, Zecher Tzis Mitzrayim, but the Avraham cannot deny that the Kiyum mitzvah is enhanced by Ribui Sipur. The more we speak, the more we get into details to understand the development of the events, starting with Avdus and going on to Cheres, the greater the mitzvah is. And Tosfos raises this question in a different context. In Masechta Sukkah, on Daf Lamed Tes, Tosfos raises the question of Mida'ag Bei Nafik Bei, which means that the very moment I take the Daled Minim into my hands, I've already achieved the Kiyum mitzvah of Ulakachtan. Therefore, Tosfos asks the question, how can I make a bracha asher kitzonu v'tzos tzimanu al netilas lulav if I've already fulfilled my mitzvah the very moment I lift up the Daled Minim, Mida Agbe, Nafik Be, he was Yotzei. And Tosfos refuses to assume, at least in his Kasha and a number of his Terutzim, that he would recite the bracha before he even lifts up the Daled Minim while they're on the table. It's like in Tefillin, so the poskim write, you should not make the bracha on Tefillin while the Tefillin are munachos al gabi shulchan. You should first unravel the Tefillin, because you want the bracha to be samach asiyah, as close as possible to the asiyah.
I'm struggling with the premise of the Avraham, in that the Tilas Lulav, okay, I understand the physical, the nusach of the bracha is al Tilas Lulav. So when you're physically taking the Lulav in your hands, so you're mekayim the mitzvah. So if you took it in your hands, you didn't make the bracha, I understand why you mekayim the mitzvah. I don't see how, I think it's a stretch. I'm sorry to say, I think it's a stretch to suggest that you mekayim the mitzvah of Hagadah Lebincha when you're declaring in Kiddush, Zeichel Yitzias Mitzrayim. I don't see how
Okay, great.
that is even remotely close to satisfying the descriptive words used to describe the mitzvah.
So, Elio, what you said now was said by the Chavas Das. Again, I apologize to the people who don't have the text, but we'll read it out loud, so don't worry about it. It's just one line. But if you take a look in the text on the left column, on the paragraph that starts V'al Etzem HaTirutz, do you see that?
Yeah.
Where this is an article that I published many years ago, where the Chavas Das is going to give your answer in his famous commentary on the Hagadah called Ma'aseh Nisim. So let's leave that on the side. We'll come back to it immediately. But first, the question that I asked you about Netilas Lulav, which is really Tosfos Kasha. I don't want to make the bracha while the Daled Minim are on the Shulchan. That's that's already too far removed. But once I take the Daled Minim into my hands, I've already fulfilled my mitzvah. I can't make the bracha. So one of the answers to Tosfos is that he's going to pick up 3 out of the 4, or maybe he'll take 1 out of the 4 minim and he'll turn it upside down. And but that's not what interests me. What fascinates me is that Tosfos gives the following answer. He says that a mitzvah lo nigmara shechayev lenanea b'shas halel. Now again, the Gemara says mida agbi nafik be. He was already yotze when he lifted up the Daled Minim. But Tosfos now is saying, guess what? He's going to do nanuim b'shas halel. And therefore, even after he lifted up the 4 minim, which means that he was yotze the mitzvah, nevertheless, he can still make the bracha. And why is it considered over lasiyasan? Because he's looking forward to nanuim in Hallel. Do you hear this? Rabbosai, what Tosas is saying is that overly Lisiyosan can be achieved whenever the mitzvah is not complete, and I still have what the Israelis call a bis, a bite. I still have a bite of the mitzvah forthcoming. And in the case of lulav, what is that bis of a mitzvah, that piece of a mitzvah that I still have to anticipate? It's nanuim in Hallel. And by the way, you'll take a look in the poskim, they'll tell you not to be mafsik between the bracha and Hallel. So some have the minhag of taking the Daled Minim in the sukkah. That was my father's minhag. When he woke up in the morning, he made a bracha al netilas lulav. Maybe you shouldn't be mafsik until Hallel. That's a long trip. But for those who say the bracha right before Hallel, nishkefel, so you won't be mafsik until you do the nanuim in Hallel. But it's clear from Tosfos that the bracha is chal on the nanuim, and not only that, but according to Tosfos, there is no bracha on the ikar mitzvah of lulav because you took it into your hands and midag be nofik bay, but the bracha was established on the gemar, or shall we say hashlamat hakiyu, which is only going to be clinched in anuim in Hallel. And for sure, in the case of Hagadah, even if I grant you that Zeichel Yitzias Mitzrayim in Kiddush is sufficient, it's the bare bones, but certainly he's got a lot in front of him, a lot more than I would say Nanuim and Hallel. He's got Ribui Sipur, which he's going to fulfill throughout the entire evening with Magid, ending with Gal Yisrael, and even beyond that. So I certainly would submit to you, Rabbosai, that even if I grant the Avidram's premise that I was Yotzei, the mitzvah of Hagadah in Kiddush, I would still insist that Tosfos would reject the conclusion of the Avidraham, because as long as there's a Gemar Kiyuma mitzvah, I can still call it over Lasiyos. Now, I'd like to ask a technical question. Is Kiddush the first time on the night of Pesach that we recite Zeichel Yitzias Mitzrayim?
Yes.
Well, we'll get to Kriya Shema in a minute, but before we get to Kriya Shema, open up a siddur to any Shabbat, Leil Shabbos davening or any Leil Yontif davening, and you will see Yitzias Mitzrayim in the backbone of the tefillah. So why did the Avidram have to stretch his arm out to Kiddush? Tefillah comes before Kiddush. And here, Rabbosai, you have to know something about Tosefes Yontif. When is the earliest time to daven on any Erev Shabbos or Erev Yontif? That's called Tosefes. And Tosefes could be from Plaga Mincha on. So imagine, a person was makabel on themselves Tosefes Yontif, it's still light out. That's what we're going to be doing for early Shabbos, for those who daven early Shabbos. Still light out, and we're davening. But as far as the mitzvah of Hagadah Lebincha, Tosefes Shabbos is not sufficient. And therefore, the Shulchan Aruch paskins that the first kos of the Dalit kosos, namely Kiddush, should only be recited, Kiddush should only be recited after nightfall. Because all the mitzvahs of the night of Pesach, including matzah and maror and sipur yitzis Mitzrayim, are all to be compared to one paradigmic mitzvah. What is the paradigmic mitzvah that sets the tone and the zman for all the mitzvahs of the night of the Seder? Yes? Korban Pesach, for sure. And we have an equation between matzah and korban pesach, and morah and korban pesach, and sipur tzis mitzrayim. Rav Gamliel says that you can only recite sipur tzis mitzrayim when the pesach is munach lefanecha. Ba'avur zeh. And the pesach could not be eaten mibodom when it's still light out, even after he was makabel on himself Tosefes Yontiv. Why not? The Torah requires Laila. And kol hakavod to Tosefes. You could be kabel yourself Tosefes, but you can't change day into night. So you're still holding by day. In fact, the Shach Paskins, based on the Sefer Ogur, then in a Sphira, we're going to have Sphira coming around the corner. Let's say it was day 40 on Friday, day 41 on Shabbos, and you were Makabel Shabbos, but it's still light out. Says the Ogur, you will count day 40 and not day 41, because Sphiras are over depends on Yom and Laila. And with all due respect to Tosefes, that's not going to change Yom into Laila. And even if the whole year round we could recite Kiddush right after Tosefes, even though it's light out, but on the night of Pesach, Kiddush has to wait until nightfall. So if the Rav wants to darshan in shul on the night of Pesach, and you're complaining, wait a minute, I'm going to get home late, and the children are tired, don't blame the Rav, because he wants to make sure and guarantee that you'll be reciting Kiddush when it's night. Because of the achlu es habasar b'layla hu. Everything on the night of Pesach requires Laila. So therefore, the Avudraham points out that if you are to be Yotzei, the mitzvah of Sipur Yisrael with Zecher Li'Yitzias Mitzrayim, it's got to be in Kiddush. Because I know that in Kiddush, he's going to be reciting Kiddush after nightfall. And at that time, he could be Yotzei the mitzvah of Hagadah Mincha. But the Avudraham could not have mentioned that there's a mention of Yetzias Mitzrayim in Tefillah, because Tefillah, he might be davening Mibojom when it's still light, after he was Makabel Tosefes Yom. And that would not be a fulfillment of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. But hey, you know what? I'm not even sure if Kiddush has to be at night. If you look carefully at the Shulchan Aruch, he says that you drink the first kos after nightfall. Kiddush, which is a mitzvah the whole year round, I can recite even before nightfall. So let's say, for example, I'm going to give you a model case, which is very unlikely, but just for the sake of Abertos, let's say 7 o'clock is Seis HaKochov. Could he recite Kiddush at 6:59, finish his Kiddush at 7 p.m. punct, and then drink the first of the Dalet Kosos? Because the Kiddush is not part of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim at all. How does the Avudraham know that the Kiddush will be B'layla? Maybe the Shtiyas HaKos is going to be B'layla, because that's part of the matrix of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, as we discussed at great length yesterday, day before yesterday. But as far as Kiddush is concerned, the Machayim of Kiddush is Mitzvah B'Av Yomed is Yontiv. And for me, it's Yontiv. But I suspect that the Avudraham holds that even Kiddush requires Laila. For 2 reasons. First of all, because Kiddush is integrated on the night of Pesach into the mitzvah, into the fabric of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. It's not just Kiddush. It's a different kind of a Kiddush. I used to have, but I don't know what my Sfarim are anymore. I moved from Harnof to Efrat, from Efrat to Ramat Beit Shem. I don't know where any of my Sfarim are. But I used to have a sefer from the author of Torah Shlema, Rav Menachem Kasher. And he has Hagadah Shlema. In the Hagadah Shlema, he publishes the Kiddush, the Nusach HaKiddush of Rav Saji Gaon, one of the Gaonim. The Kiddush is long for the Yiddish Golos. It's like pages and pages long. You've got the whole Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim in that one Kiddush. No doubt that Rav Saadia Gaon would recite Kiddush B'Laila. But I think it's more than that. Kiddush requires what's called a makom suda. Ein Kiddush el b'makom suda. And I don't know if it's a makom suda al shem ha'asid, meaning the zman for the suda, which means matzah, is only Laila. So even though you makabel on yourself till Sefes Yontif, it's still premature for Su'uda. You're going to be Kovea Suda B'Laila, because that's when you're going to eat the matzah, and Memela, the Kiddush requires Makom Suda, also has to be B'Laila.
So Mokum means man.
What I'm suggesting is that you can't call it a Makom Suda if it's not possible to eat the Suda. Al Pidin, you can't eat the Suda. It's not Laila. I mean, you might be able to eat matzah shira, maybe. Maybe that would make it into a Mokum Suda. I don't know. Our minig is not to eat matzah shira because it's Kibol Arisosa. Okay, we won't go into that right now. So this is the teretz of the Adruba, of the Avudran. Comes along the Chavas Das, who's the author of the Ma'aseh Nisim. Anybody know who he was by any chance? The Chavas Das. If you learn your day for Smicha, Rav Leo and I were once discussing a Smicha program. The Chavas Das is a super commentary on Yoredeya, but he's more famous, believe it or not, for his commentary on Choshen Mishpat. It's called the Nesivas HaMishpat. His name was Rav Yaakov Milisa, and he was a genius of geniuses. He was a bar plukta to a large extent of the Ketzos, if you heard of the Ketzos HaChoshen. And he wrote a commentary on the Hagadah. And in his commentary, he writes that mitzvah Hagadah v'sipur lo yotza b'amiras kiddush bilvad. You cannot fulfill your mitzvah of Hagadah with kiddush. Sharei, zeu ikar evdel bein mitzvah zechiras yitzias mitzrayim anoheges b'chol hashana kula, l'bein mitzvah sipur yitzias mitzrayim anoheges b'leil tesvav b'nisan. Mitzvah zechira, the whole year round, is haskara koldu. All you have to do is mention Yitzias Mitzrayim, and you yotze the whole year round. But the ilu mitzvah sipur, the special mitzvah, the unique mitzvah on Tesvav ben Nisan, koleles pirut hanisim vaniflaot sha'asalonu hakadosh baruch hu mitzvah. Excuse me. So it comes out according to the Chavas Das. You cannot be yotze your mitzvah CPT trying with kiddush, because therein lies the difference between zechira and sipur. Now the Avudraham quotes a second answer. By the way, you'll see this on the page that we gave out 2 days ago. But he says the following: Varashba kosav tamacher she'en levarach al kriyasa. Mipnei shehi mitzvah she'ein la kitzvah yidua. Ein la kitzvah yidua. Now, every mitzvah has a minimum. Sometimes the minimum is a koldu. Like, for example, in Truma, we say chitachas poter sakri. But not every mitzvah has a maximum. There are some mitzvahs that are unlimited. You could keep going and going and going. Like, take, for example, the mitzvah of Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim. Tell you, Mesubim Kolos Alayla, and Chazal say, Kol Amarbel is Saper. What's the limit? What's the end? But so what? Therefore, it doesn't deserve a bracha. We spoke at great length about why there's no bracha on Daled Kosov. We say because they have sekos, and we were racking our brains. Why is the fact that a mitzvah has sekos, therefore it doesn't deserve a bracha? But now the Rashba is saying something totally different. A mitzvah she'ein lo kitzvah, which if you ask me, that's a first-class mitzvah. I would put it on the top of the agenda. And yet it doesn't deserve a bracha. Anybody? We need a Maisa mitzvah. We need to define a Maisa mitzvah. It's got to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And on that entity, called a Maisa mitzvah, we make a bracha. But if you have a mitzvah shein lo kitzvah, you could never ever define the Maisa mitzvah, because if you define it like this, I'll say, well, let's add this, and you keep going and going and going. Shein lo kitzvah basically means that there's no well-defined Maisa mitzvah. And now the Rashba is telling us that a bracha on a mitzvah requires a defined Maisa mitzvah.
In other words, it's not sufficient that sipur, and therefore articulation with words from your mouth, is not, in the Rashba's approach, is not considered to be a Maisa.
No, articulation is a Maisa. We have many mitzvahs that are dibur, and we make a bracha on them, but it's got to be a dibur that starts and ends. And that gives me a Maisa. If it keeps going and going endlessly without any, it's a bar sid.
Isn't that Leil Tesvav?
So how can you make a bracha on Hagadah bincha when it goes and goes and goes?
The
whole night. Keep going and going and going.
And right. Isn't that a kitzur? Is that a bounded times? From says till night.
It could be that, again, this is a long discussion, but the mitzvah of Hagadah bincha continues into the day. There's such a sheet in the Gon, I think. Yeah. But I wanted to point out one thing. If you take a look, the Maralmi Prague says that he doesn't understand the kasha. Why? Because ikar mitzvah machshavas halev v'lo shayach bracha el al mitzvah sheikara b'maisa. Yeah, but remember the Gemara about Suma that we said. We said that the mitzvah is the kriya, and certainly the Avidraham understood, and so the Rashba understood the mitzvah is kriya. The Maral Miprag says the kriya is just, it's almost irrelevant. What's relevant is the machshavas halev, and we don't make a bracha unless it's a ma'isa mitzvah, but not a bracha machshavas halev. But the Shibbolei Aleket, who was around the same time, maybe even a little earlier than the Avudraham, he offers a different approach, two different approaches actually, to the question of why there's no bracha on Hagadah bincha. Says the Shibbolei Aleket, mitzvahs Hagadah, mitzvahs aseh, v'haisa te'una bracha, elishin if teres b'kriyat shma. You mentioned Elio kriyat shma. We make a bracha on kriyat shma, and that bracha on kriyat shma will carry over and encompass Hagadah bincha. Again, the assumption is that kriyat shma requires Laila. For that, you have to learn the first sugi in Shas. But be that as it may, Mishosh HaKonim Nithnosim Lechol B'Trumasam is B'Shal B'Cham means Laila. And you cannot fulfill the mitzvah of Kriyat Shema. That's why they clap on the table and they say, don't forget to recite Kriyat Shema when you get home at night. So Mamela, that's going to be a Zman HaRoi L'Sipur Yitzis Mitzrayim. So the brach on Kriyat Shema will now cover you for the mitzvah of Sipur Yitzis Mitzrayim. But I don't understand what the man is talking about. What does the mitzvah of Kriyat Shema have to do with the mitzvah of Sipur Yitzis Mitzrayim? My high. Tzvei bezundere mitzvahs. We have a mitzvah of Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shamayim, which is called Kriyat Shema. We have a mitzvah of Sipur Yitzis Mitzrayim. Never the twain shall meet. Where's the overlap here? How could I possibly entertain the idea that I was Yotzei the bracha on Sipur with my bracha on Kriyat Shema? If I make a bracha on Lulav, will it cover me for matzah? If they were both on the same night? Mm-hmm. You see a gewaltige chiddush here in the Shibbolei Aleket. What is the mitzvah of Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim? It's basically Kriyat Shema. Come on, you got to be fooling me. If it was Chodesh Adar, okay, I'm going to make some jokes, fine, but it's already Nisan. This is pretty serious. The essence of Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim is Kabbalas O Malchus Shamayim. Anochi Hashem Elokecha Asher Hotziisicha me'eretz Mitzrayim lios lachem le'elokim. And I will fulfill my mitzvah of Zechiras Yitzias Mitzrayim the whole year round in Kriyat Shema. And on Leil HaPesach, with Kriyat Shema, which ends in the 3rd chapter of Vayomer, with Yitzias Mitzrayim, I fulfill my mitzvah of Kriyat Shema and also the mitzvah of Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim. Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim is that God took us out of Mitzrayim for what purpose? Termination of Avdus? Yes and no. Termination of Avadayim v'lo Avadim la'avadim. We will no longer be slaves to another human being, but instead we replace that slavery with servitude to Hashem. And that is Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shamayim. So now the brachas of Kriyat Shema will accomplish 2 goals. Number 1, they're at Laila, because Kriyat Shema requires Laila b'Shalbacha, which is the time that's Roy for Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim. But more important, the essence of Kriyat Shema, the essence of Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim, the kiyum of both are identical. Because the kiyum of both is Kabbalas O Malchus Shamayim. And therefore the bracha on one will cover the bracha on the other. So it's not pshat like we said until now that Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim doesn't deserve a bracha. And why doesn't it deserve a bracha? Because it's a davar shein lo kitzva. There's no well-defined ma'aseh mitzvah, or alternatively, it's a kiyum shebelev. The mitzvah is belev. Forget about all that. The mitzvah is kriya, and it requires a bracha. But guess what? We have a bracha on the mitzvah of Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim, and that is the bracha of Kriyat Shema. Although, when you think about it, the bracha of Kriyat Shema is not a Birchas HaMitzvah. There's no Asher Kidshorim Mitzvos V'Tzivonu. But the truth is that you can convert the brachas of Kriyat Shema, or at least one of them, into a Birchas HaMitzvah. On what mitzvah? Talmud Torah. Let's say, for example, I didn't make a bracha on Talmud Torah, or in the classic case, I don't remember, did I make my Birchas HaTorah? Did I not? Of course, nobody here tonight ever had such a stuff. Well, I did many times. So the poskim say that if you have kavana in Ava Rabbah, which is all about Torah, then that bracha will cover you for Talmud Torah. So wait a second. What are you telling me? You're telling me that Birchas Kriyat Shema is a bracha on Talmud Torah, and it could substitute as a Birchas HaMitzvah. I didn't say Asher Kidshorim Mitzvos V'Tzivonu Al Divrei Torah or Lasik B'Divrei Torah, and I get away with Birchas Kriyat Shema because Kriyat Shema is also Torah. Now, if that be the case, why didn't the Shibbolei Aleket say that I was Yotzei my Birchas HaMitzvah on Sipur with Birchas HaTorah that I recited that morning on Yudalit in the morning? It covers all the Torah that I'm going to learn that night, Leil Tezvav. But the answer is, Rabosai, we need a special kind of Talmud Torah. There's a unique kind of Talmud Torah that is not to be equated with classic general Talmud Torah. It's a specific Talmud Torah. It's a Talmud Torah sheyesh ba Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shamayim. And which Talmud Torah has Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shamayim, there are two answers, and they're both correct. Number one, Kriyat Shema, and number two, Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim.
And the Kriya Shema is, as you indicate, on the words, Ani Hashem Elokecha, Asher Seisi Esra Meretz Mitzrayim, Lios Lachem Elokim. That's the link.
Last three words. Lios Lachem Elokim.
Mhm.
Tachas Tavdun et Elokim Tachas HaHar. Why did Hashem take us out of Mitzrayim? So that we will accept the Torah. My Rebbe Zichron Levrach used to say that if you look carefully at the Arami Ovid Avi in Parshas Kitavo, we darshan, I think it's 4 or maybe 5 psukim, but we leave out the pasuk of Eretz Yisrael. Do you happen to have a chumash with Kitavo in it?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry to bother you. I didn't know I would. All right. Anyway, you could trust me on this. The psukim of the Mevi Bikurim terminate and culminate in a crescendo of Eretz Yisrael. No mention on the night of the Seder. And it's so strange because we learned so many halachas from Mikra Bikurim in the analogy to Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, but yet at one point we cut it off. And my Rebbe used to say that the goal of Yetzias Mitzrayim, oh, thank you, is Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shamayim. So we'll say the following psukim. We'll say Arami Ovid Avi, Vayer Mitzrayim, etc., etc. We'll say Vayer Reu Osara Mitzrayim, etc., etc. Vayisakel Shema Ke'avotenu, Vayishma Hashem El Tzkolenu, Vayotzienu Hashem Mitzrayim B'yod Chazaka. All that we recite and darshan on the night of Pesach. But the next pasuk and the one afterwards, which is an integral part of Havas Bikurim, is completely omitted on the night of the Seder. Vayavienu el hamakom hazeh vayiten lanu es haaretz hazos eretz zavas chol udvash v'ata yinei vesi es reishis pri hadomo asher nasato li. Totally omitted. So if Soloveitch wanted to say that the purpose of Yetzias Mitzrayim and its ultimate goal is Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shamayim, that we should be avodim to Hashem. Eretz Yisrael is something different. It's not part of the very essence of Yetzias Mitzrayim. I would have said something a little different. The Rambam, when he opens up his Nusach Hagadah at the end of Hilchos Chametz Matzah, he says, "Ze Nusach Asher Tiknu Osa Begolus." If you have a Rambam, so in Golus, I don't know if we should be mentioning Eretz Yisrael. You know what I mean? So you're in, let's say, Toronto, Canada, or Melbourne, Australia. Very nice. It's wonderful there, but it's not Eretz Yisrael. So on this night, where we're focused on Golus and Geula, but we're living in Golus, maybe it's not such a great idea to thank Hashem for taking us to Eretz Yisrael. I mean, again, there's a cash on what I'm saying, because then at least the Bnei Eretz Yisrael should be adding those psukim. But they wanted it to be Shavel Chol Nefesh. Now the Shibbolei HaLeket gives a second answer. And even according to the second answer, he claims there is a bracha on Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, just so we don't know about it. We don't pay any attention to it. He says the following: Masha Omrim B'sof Hagadah Asher Galanu, etc. He Birchas Hagadah. Vayeshba Haskaras Matzah Umorar Upesach. V'yesh la tshuva. Yeshba, in that bracha we have a tshuva lechol hashelot for all the questions that come up on this night. Valkain, poskim ba bibaruch v'chosmin bibaruch. Right, we have Baruch Atah Hashem at the beginning of the bracha and Baruch Atah Hashem at the end. We could check that out in the Hagadah. And he adds a point, which is one of the rules and regulations in brachos, that when do you open with a bracha and end with a bracha? In a matbea aruch. Right? A matbea aruch means when you have a bracha that has more than one theme to it. It's a multi-thematic bracha. And then we have to add a chasima. That's called a matbea aruch. It doesn't mean we count words. How many words? How long is it? No. And this bracha of Gal Yisrael is multi-thematic. Many themes in that bracha. We talk about Avdos L'Cheirus, we talk about Yogon this, we talk about Matzah and Mara. Many different themes are integrated into that last bracha. Therefore, it's Matbea Aruch. It requires a Psicha B'Baruch and a Chasima B'Baruch. But now the Shibboleth Leket is telling us an amazing chiddush. That bracha is the bracha on Sipri Tzis Mitzrayim. But obviously, and he himself raises this objection, raises this question, why is it at the end of the Hagadah? If it's a bracha on the Hagadah, it should be at the beginning of the Hagadah. He gives a somewhat technical answer. He says that in Sipri Tzisrael we require Shibud and then Geula, in that order. Maskil B'Gnus, U'Mesayim B'Shvat. If we're going to recite this bracha of Gal Yisrael at the very beginning, and we mention the Avdus, and then afterwards we mention the Cherus, the Geula, then you've already implemented Maskil B'Gnus U'Mesayim B'Shvat. You let the cat out of the bag from the very beginning. Once you already mentioned the Geula, Baruch Atah Hashem Gal Yisrael, then you're not going to go back to the Shibud. Shibud, by definition, has to come before Geula. But in that last bracha, we mentioned Geula, and therefore it's impossible to go back to Shibud and fulfill the mitzvah of Maskil B'Gnus. So it comes out that according to the Shibboleth Leket, Sipri Tzis Mitzrayim has a bracha, whether it's the bracha on Kriyat Shema, according to his first answer, or whether it's a bracha of Gal Yisrael in his second answer. I once heard from my Rebbe Rav Alpert Olvashom. I don't know if you ever heard of Rav Nisan Alpert. Sure. He once claimed, I was a high school student, but this I remember. I don't remember too much, but he said that a Matbea Aruch is a Matbea that reflects in the very Nusach HaBracha all the dimensions of that mitzvah. In other words, every Birchas HaMitzvah just mentions the name of the mitzvah. But there are rare and far between brachos where Chazal established that the bracha itself should reflect all the different dimensions of that mitzvah. That's called a Matbea Aruch, where all the themes that make up the essence of that mitzvah are reflected in the nusach of the Matbea Bracha. And I think, based on Rabbi Alpert, we could suggest that the reason why Birchas Asher Galanu is a bracha, requires a bracha at the beginning, a bracha at the end, because it's a Matbea Aruch, is because every dimension of Sipri Tzis Mitzrayim is all the questions that we're going to ask this night are all being answered in that one bracha. So it's a Matbea Aruch. And therefore it's a bracha on the mitzvah, the multifaceted mitzvah of Sipri Tzis Mitzrayim. It should be at the very beginning, but for technical reasons, it couldn't be at the very beginning, so they placed it at the end. But it's chalav afreya on the entire mitzvah of Hagadah to Levin. So let's just quickly summarize the various answers that we have, why there's no bracha, or maybe there is a bracha, on the mitzvah of Sipur Yitzis Mitzrayim. First answer, the HaMitzvah says we already yotze the mitzvah of Sipur Yitzis Mitzrayim in Kiddush, where we said Zeichel Yitzis Mitzrayim. We had a big problem with that because Tosafos says that if there's more to the mitzvah than that, it still is over Lasiyasan. So who cares if he was yotze with Kiddush and he recited Zeichel Yitzis Mitzrayim? He still has to look forward to so much more to the mitzvah of Sipur Yitzis Mitzrayim. And like Tosafos' analogy to Nanuim during Hal. Then we had a second answer. And that's the Rashba. That's a mitzvah she'ein lo kitzvah, meaning that there's no well-defined ma'aseh mitzvah on which they could be masakin of bracha. So the thought occurred to me, we do make a bracha on Talmud Torah. I mean, Talmud Torah is also a mitzvah she'ein lo kitzvah.
Well, the Yavanis. Maybe that's the break. That's why I have to say it every day, or let's say it once when you turn one mitzvah.
Right, but I'm just asking, what's the difference between Sipur Yitzis Mitzrayim, called a marble is saper, and therefore it's a mitzvah she'ein lo kitzvah, and Talmud Torah? I mean, see, if I would ask the question about Kriyas HaTorah b'tzibur, that would not be a question, because that's a mitzvah sheyesh lo kitzvah. We got to read one parsha from the beginning to the end. But what about the mitzvah Talmud Torah? I'm tempted to think this is Rav Baruch Ber Kamenetz's breakthrough. He said that every word of Torah is a separate mitzvah to itself. Interesting how he proved it. So it says, Ein lo shir, Talmud Torah ein lo shir. If every word is a separate mitzvah of Talmud Torah, then it's a davar sheish lo kitzvah, because it starts with the beginning of the word and ends with the end of the word, or the beginning of the pasuk and the end of the pasuk. Every thought unit is a mitzvah Talmud Torah to itself. I don't have to repeat the bracha. I mean, then you have Tosafos Kasha and the Rosh about it is the hefsekos and all that. So they say there's no hefsekos. Everything you do is in order to come back and continue learning Torah. Then we have the Shibbolei Aleket. Shibbolei Aleket offers two other answers. And both of the Shibbolei Aleket's answers seem to assume that there is a bracha on Sipur Yitzis Mitzrayim. And the first answer is the bracha on Kriyat Shema. But we were wondering what's the connection between Kriyat Shema and Sipur Yitzis Mitzrayim. And the answer is what? I'm testing you to see if you're following me. I know you're tired. Kabbalas ol Malchus Shamayim.
It's right here.
And then the Shibbolei Alek gives a second answer. And that is Bal Yisrael. Afilu kulanu chachamim, kulanu nevonim, kulanu zkedim, kulanu yodim esator mitzvah leinu l'saper. What's the chiddush here? Why would I think that a chacham sheyodeas haTorah is part of the mitzvah Sipur Yitzis Mitzrayim?
He's already got it on his list.
He knows everything. In other words, if we define Sipur as Yediyah, he already has the Yediyah. He's gone through every single medrash. He knows every answer, every nuance, every question. But the answer is it's a separate mitzvah of Sipur, even if you already know everything. We have here a machlokes quoted in the Hagadah between Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah and the Chachamim. And that is regarding L'mantiskar Yom Tzeischov Mitzrayim Kol Yimei Chayech. What do we do? What do we dash? What do we derive from the extra word Kol Yimei Chayech? According to one approach, L'Rabos Salelos. If we would have just said Laman Tizkars Yom Tzeischov, but not Kol Yimei Chayech, and then we would have assumed Yom Tzeischov means by day. Now we have many mitzvahs that are daytime mitzvahs. And that's Ben Zoma's drasha. But then we have the Chachamim. The Chachamim hold that the word Kol is coming to be marba something else. And that is Lahavi Limos HaMashiach. So I want to share with you something from Reb Shnei Cotton. I don't know if I got a chance to share this with you. If I did, stop me in the middle because I don't want to bore you. Reb Shnei used to say that every time we have a word kol as a ribui, the word in Chazal after kol is l'rabos. This is the only exception. Here we say kol lahavi. Is there a difference between l'rabos and lahavi? And in order to answer that question, Reb Shnei quoted the piyut, for those who recited it this past Shabbos, of Shabbos HaChodesh Hazel Lachem. And there's a very fascinating line in the piyut. You see how the Gedolei Yisrael organized piyut. So this you'll see on the bottom of the second page. Shir Chadash Vehega Midrashim Tiranin Asfasai Bishuri Arba Chreishim. Chazal tell us that there'll be 4 golios. I have a cash on that, but not for now because Yishmael is not one of the 4 golios. But anyway, so we have 4 golios, and the Python says that we will be singing a new song, we'll be learning new midrashim at the time of the termination of the 4 golios, and that's at the time of Mashiach. Says Reb Shnei, we make a big mistake. We think the mitzvah is Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim. No. The mitzvah is Sipur HaGeula. Again, the only Geula that we have right now is Yitzias Mitzrayim, but ultimately there'll be Mos HaMashiach, there'll be a greater Geula that will draw off the Geula of Mitzrayim. And the mitzvah of Sipur will take on a whole new meaning and a whole new hekev. It will include not only the many midrashim about Yitzias Mitzrayim and the Asar Makas, etc., but also the midrashim about the great nisim and flows of Achros HaYomim of Yemos HaMashiach. And I thought to myself, maybe this would answer a question that really bothered me. Again, you'll only be bothered by this question if you're a true blue brisker. But Chazal tell us that we should open up the night of Seder by inviting people to our table. Kol dichvin yesei v'yechol. And that's the paragraph of Holachman. Why? On the night of Sukkot, we shouldn't be inviting the guests. On the night of Shavuos, maybe every Shabbos, maybe every day. What is it about Leil HaSeder that ba'ofen miyuchad we've got to invite guests? And the answer that the Mefarshim give is very antithetical to brisk. So I have a problem with it. Because the Torah, Yeshaya Novi says, Sion v'mishpat tipode v'shaveh b'tzedakah. There's one mitzvah in the Taryag mitzvahs that has a school of power to bring about the Geula. And that's the mitzvah of tzedakah. So if you're a Lubavitcher, for example, you do whatever you can to bring about the Geula. And there are many minhagim in Lubavitch that reflect that idea. We have to actively. So we, on the night of the Seder, are going to act out the mitzvah of Chesed and Tzedakah and invite the Aniyim to Asuda. Why? Because this is the night of the Geula. But if you're a brisker, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't sit well with you because we don't choose mitzvahs in order to bring about the geula. We do mitzvahs because God commanded us to do mitzvahs. We're not interested in bringing about the geula. But the answer, I think, is based on Reb Shneya, that the mitzvah of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim on this night is incomplete. We only have part of the mitzvah, because we only have the geula of Mitzrayim. But ultimately, when Mashiach will come and will have the complete geula, then the mitzvah of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim will be expanded, and it will reach its ultimate culmination, its fulfillment. And therefore, we want to do everything we can on this night so that we can fulfill our chiyuv of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, because the mitzvah is not Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, but Sipur HaGeula. And never now we don't have the geula, and we need it so desperately. And now we have an opportunity in the whole Achmanya called Dichvin Yeseh V'Yechol, that Tzion b'mishpat tipada v'shaver b'tzedakah. With tzedakah we can bring about the geula, and then we'll fulfill the mitzvah of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim Azevi Darvstein the way it's meant to be. So we are fulfilling our obligation on this night by inviting the poor people to our Sudi. Yiratzon may be His will. They should be zocheh to learn Torah on the deepest level, and to reveal some of the secrets of the Torah, the deeper meaning of the Torah. And on this Chag Pesach, Chag Geula, should be zocheh to the complete fruition, the totality of the mitzvah of Sipur, when Hashem will bring us the ultimate geula with bias, gold, tzidkenu b'meherav yameinu. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much.
Amen. Thank you so much. And that's the bracha I think everybody is hoping for, particularly this year. This year's fulfillment.
You know, Lubavitch, they say, we want Mashiach now. And I say, we need Mashiach now.